I'm a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and I teach about poverty. I'm inundated by do-good videos, each promising to impart wisdom to my students, each calling for selfless and noble action. Donate money to sponsor a hungry child, volunteer to build homes after a disaster, live on $1 a day. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of these forms of poverty action, but these videos usually portray the poor as victims, waiting to be helped and saved, and in contrast portray poverty warriors, usually young, privileged Americans, as those who can change the world through their altruism. But I know that the story of social change is much more complex.
My name is Abby, and I've been a young, privileged American for 23 years now. I, like most others in the millennial generation, am surrounded by pictures of poor people, maps and statistics in big white fonts. They're tools that help us to see poverty and to care that it exists, and provide us with opportunities to help, and then of course put it all on our college applications. Although occasionally we'll be inspired to watch 3/4 of the way through a TED Talk or an episode of 60 Minutes about the fight against poverty. But I did watch all of the Kony 2012 video and really thought about ordering the action pack, but I think I was too lazy to find my credit card. But do these messages push us to care not just that poverty exists, but to ask why it exists, and to think about the role that we play in the existence of poverty and inequality?
I am no video maker, but one day a young woman, backpack on her shoulder, frisbee in hand, walked into my office. She was a student in my global poverty class. As she rifled through her class notes, I realized that this was no ordinary note-taking. Each lecture had been recorded through drawing. Some were graphic novels, others were analytical diagrams, yet others felt like magical realism. I looked at her drawings and I realized that gone was the image of the brave poverty warrior posing with smiling poor children. Instead, we had relationships of power and powerlessness, keywords of action and entanglement, horizons of political imagination. And this was how I made the acquaintance of Abby VanMuijen, the young, privileged American you just met. I knew then that we had videos to make, a different type of poverty video.
I've always been a very visual learner, and I think a lot of us are. The things that I remember most from my education are the pictures, the cells and the solar system, and the things that I made, my California mission model. But I never thought in words. I changed them into pictures to help me visualize and interact with concepts that were otherwise too abstract for me to understand. In Ananya's class, I'd take notes by listening to lecture and draw out the first thing that popped into my head. And when you keep working those metaphors, sometimes they turn into three-dimensional things, like a shifting, segmented city that over time has pushed its slums to the exterior.
Bullshit. All you want to do is play with robots.
Okay, but there were serious points we wanted to make.
First, to change the world, it is necessary to critique the world. Such critical thinking is not just the work of theorists and philosophers, but rather everyone's work. Students, educators, activists, practitioners, policymakers, entrepreneurs. Second, each video is organized around a provocative question. Think about the questions my colleagues pose in their videos. Is privilege poverty? Can hope end inequality? Can experts solve poverty? These are tough questions, the ones we would rather not ask. But there are no simple answers to these questions. My students ask me all the time, where are the solutions? No surefire solutions to poverty exist in this unequal world. But nor will patience with the world as it is suffice. I ask my students to find their space of action, one that mediates between two extremes: the hubris of benevolence, we can solve poverty during a spring break, and the paralysis of cynicism, we cannot change the world. Third, these videos are about us. Poverty action often seems daunting and distant, but our everyday lives, as citizens, as professionals, even as consumers, are tied up with global poverty. From what we choose to buy and on what terms, to whether we hold our elected representatives accountable for their policy decisions, we have a role to play every day whether in local communities or across national borders, in making and unmaking a world of inequality. To imagine ourselves as saviors of the poor is foolish, but to imagine ourselves as voiceless and powerless is equally foolish.
I introduced myself as a young, privileged American because I am, and I studied at what is considered to be the world's greatest public university. But I remember going to lecture, and I would sit on my laptop and check my email, or watch YouTube videos, or fall asleep.
This is why we had to stage an intervention in that very medium, the short do-it-yourself video format that is YouTube.
Exactly. Because I remember when I first went in to meet Ananya, she said she already knew who I was. One of my classmates had seen me drawing in class and was really irritated by it. But as soon as she realized that I was actually drawing out notes for the class, she couldn't stop watching. GlobalPOV seeks to embrace that world of distractions, doodling and drawing, but also YouTube and social media, and use them as platforms for engagement rather than distraction. There's a lot of talk about the democratization of the classroom these days. And when I think about democracy, the first thing that pops into my head is Athens, and then the Agora, as a physical space where people came together to participate in public debate and deliberative democracy. Today, that Agora is a digital space, where we share and like and comment. But rather than dismissing that space as a place of distraction, we need to think about how we can use it to more fully engage not only students, but the general public.
But in the classic GlobalPOV style, we have to call bullshit on this. Because just as Athenian democracy had its exclusions, remember it was a world of free men with no part for women and slaves, the very media platforms we rely on today, including for these videos, are part of the systems of global capitalism that produce inequality. From gentrification in San Francisco to the conditions of work in the assembly lines of China, we are implicated in the very processes we want to critique and change. We may not be innocent of power and privilege, but nor are we powerless. Abby, I think this returns us to what you once wrote in your class notebook, which became the key theme of the GlobalPOV videos.
And all this time, I thought the world was round. The world is not round. It has edges we can fall from and faces staring in entirely different directions. And I thought the world was huge, but it is not. It's in our hands. We can hold it, change it, turn it, shake it. We can solve it. But not by sheer luck or chance. We must be taught the way.